The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret, but it was the soft beep of the monitor that kept me tethered to reality. I woke up to find my nephew, Jamie, curled in the chair beside me, his 18-year-old face streaked with tears, clutching a letter he'd written while I was unconscious. What he did while I slept changed everything, and I wasn't prepared for the storm of emotions it unleashed. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 34, a high school history teacher in Brooklyn, New York. I'd always been the cool uncle to Jamie, the one he turned to when his parents' strict rules suffocated him. But that night, after a car accident landed me in the ICU with a fractured leg and a concussion, Jamie did something I never expected. He left a confession, scrawled in shaky handwriting, admitting he was gay and terrified. He'd come out to me in that letter, left on my hospital tray, because he thought I might not wake up. The weight of his secret, and the trust he placed in me, hit harder than the crash that put me here. I'd always known Jamie was different. Growing up in a conservative family in upstate New York, he'd been the quiet kid who sketched cityscapes in notebooks and avoided the family's hunting trips. His parents, my sister Laura and her husband Greg, were good people but rigid, their world built on tradition and unspoken expectations. Jamie's soft-spoken nature and disinterest in their version of manly activities had always been a silent point of tension. I'd moved to Brooklyn a decade ago to escape that same rigidity, to live openly as a gay man, though I kept that part of myself hidden from most of my family. Jamie's letter felt like a mirror, reflecting my own fears from years ago. When I finally opened my eyes, the hospital's fluorescent light stung, but Jamie's presence grounded me. He was slouched in the chair, his hoodie swallowing his lanky frame, his blonde hair falling into his eyes. "Uncle Ethan?" he whispered, voice cracking. "You're awake." "Yeah, kid," I croaked, my throat dry. "I read your letter." His face paled and he looked ready to bolt. I reached out, wincing as pain shot through my leg, and grabbed his hand. "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm proud of you." That moment was the start of something bigger than either of us could have predicted. Jamie's confession wasn't just about him. It was a spark that would ignite changes in both our lives, forcing us to confront secrets, love, and the kind of courage it takes to live authentically. Over the next few days, as I recovered, Jamie visited daily. He told me about the bullying he'd faced at school, the whispered slurs in the locker room, and the fear that his parents would reject him. I listened, my heart aching for the kid who'd carried this alone. But I also saw strength in him, a quiet, stubborn resilience that reminded me of myself at his age. I promised to help him navigate this, to be the family he needed. What I didn't expect was how his courage would push me to face my own unfinished business. I'd been single for years, too busy with work and too cautious after a string of bad relationships. But Jamie's vulnerability stirred something in me, a longing for connection I'd buried. Enter Marcus, a 29-year-old nurse who'd been checking my charts with a quiet intensity that made my pulse race. He was tall, with warm brown skin and a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Our conversation started small, jokes about hospital food, shared eye rolls over my doctor's terrible bedside manner. But soon they stretched into late-night talks about life, dreams, and the things we'd both left unsaid. One evening, as Marcus adjusted my fore, he caught me staring. "What?" he asked, his voice teasing but soft. "Nothing," I lied, then took a breath. "Just you're easy to talk to." He grinned, his eyes crinkling. "Careful, Ethan. You keep looking at me like that. I might think you're flirting." "Maybe I am," I said, surprising myself. Jamie's letter had cracked something open in me, a bravery I hadn't felt in years. Marcus's laugh filled the room, and for the first time since the accident, I felt alive. But life isn't a straight line. Jamie's parents were coming to Brooklyn to check on me, and Jamie was terrified they'd find out about his secret. I promised to keep it safe, but I knew Laura's knack for sniffing out anything off. Meanwhile, my growing feelings for Marcus were complicated by my own fears. Could I really open my heart again? And what did it mean to be a role model for Jamie while I was still figuring out my own life? As the days passed, the hospital became a strange microcosm of our lives. Jamie wrestling with his identity, me navigating a budding romance, and the looming threat of family expectations. One night, Jamie snuck in after visiting hours, his eyes red from crying. "They're coming tomorrow," he said, voice trembling. "What if they hate me?" "They won't," I said, though I wasn't sure. "And if they do, you've got me." He nodded, but the fear in his eyes lingered. I glanced at the letter on my tray, now creased from being read and reread. Jamie had taken a leap, and now it was my turn to catch him, and maybe, just maybe, to leap myself. The hospital released me a week later, my leg in a cast and my heart tangled in knots. Marcus had slipped me his number on a folded piece of paper, his handwriting neat and deliberate. "Call me when you're ready," he'd said, his voice low and full of promise. I wanted to. But Jamie's situation felt more urgent. He was staying with me in Brooklyn while his parents visited, and the tension was palpable. Laura and Greg arrived at my apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Park Slope, with their usual mix of warmth and judgment. Laura hugged me tightly, her perfume overwhelming, while Greg clapped me on the shoulder and commented on my bachelor pad. Jamie hovered in the background, his sketchbook clutched like a shield. Dinner that night was a minefield. Laura kept asking Jamie about school, his grades, his plans for college, her voice laced with expectation. Greg, a burly man with a penchant for sports talk, tried to steer the conversation to football, but Jamie's one-word answers shut it down. I watched him shrink, and it broke my heart. "Jamie's been helping me out," I said, trying to shift the focus. "He's a good kid." Laura's smile tightened. "He's been distant lately. I don't know what's going on with him." I glanced at Jamie, who was staring at his plate. I wanted to tell her, to defend him, but I'd promised to keep his secret. Instead, I changed the subject, talking about my recovery and the history curriculum I was revising. But the air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. That night, after Laura and Greg went to their hotel, Jamie sat on my couch, sketching furiously. "They're never gonna get it," he muttered. "They'll think I'm broken." "You're not broken," I said, sitting beside him. "You're you, and that's enough." He looked at me, eyes searching. "How'd you do it?" "Tell people, I laughed, a little bitterly. "I didn't, not really. I just left. Moved here, started over. But you don't have to run, Jamie. You've got people who'll stand by you." "Like you?" he asked, his voice small. "Like me," I said, "and maybe others, too." I thought of Marcus. The way his smile made my chest ache. I pulled out my phone and stared at his number, my thumb hovering over the call button. Jamie noticed and raised an eyebrow. "Who's that?" "Someone I met," I admitted. "He's different." Jamie grinned, the first real smile I'd seen in days. "You like him?" "Maybe," I said, feeling my face heat up. "But this isn't about me. It's about you." "No," Jamie said, his voice firm. "It's about both of us." His words hit me hard. He was right, we were both fighting for the same thing. The right to love, to be seen, to live without shame. I dialed Marcus's number, my heart pounding, and when he answered, his voice was like a lifeline. "Hey, Ethan," he said, warm and steady. "Took you long enough." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jamie started opening up, bit by bit, sharing his sketches and dreams of studying art in the city. I encouraged him to apply to schools in New York, promising to help him navigate the process. Meanwhile, Marcus and I went on our first date, a quiet dinner at a hole-in-the-wall diner in Williamsburg. He told me about growing up in Harlem, the son of Jamaican immigrants, and the pressure he'd felt to make it in a world that didn't always see him. His honesty disarmed me, and by the end of the night, when he kissed me under a flickering street lamp, I felt like I was falling and flying at the same time. But the storm I'd sensed was coming. Laura called me one morning, her voice sharp. "Ethan, we need to talk about Jamie. He's been acting strange, and I found something in his room." My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "A letter," she said. "It was about boys, about feelings. Is he gay?" I froze, caught between my promise to Jamie and my loyalty to my sister. "Laura, you need to talk to him," I said carefully. "But whatever he tells you, just listen. He's still your son." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I can handle this," she admitted, her voice breaking. "What did I do wrong?" "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "He's just figuring out who he is." I hung up, my hands shaking. I knew Jamie wasn't ready for this, but the truth was out, and there was no going back. I texted him to come over, and when he arrived, his face was pale, his sketchbook gone. "She knows," he said, his voice barely audible. "She found my journal." I pulled him into a hug, letting him cry into my shoulder. "We'll get through this," I promised. "Together." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Laura and Greg showed up at my apartment unannounced, their faces a mix of confusion and anger. Jamie stood behind me, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Ethan, did you know about this?" Laura demanded, holding up Jamie's journal like it was evidence of a crime. "I did," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm proud of him for being honest." Greg's face reddened. "Proud? This isn't right, Ethan. You're supposed to guide him, not encourage this lifestyle." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice calm. "It's not a lifestyle, Greg. It's who he is. And if you can't see that, you're the ones who need to change." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "I just want him to be happy," she whispered. "He can be," I said, "but only if you let him." The room fell silent, the weight of years of unspoken truths pressing down on us. Jamie stepped forward, his voice trembling but clear. "I'm not sorry for who I am," he said. "I just want you to love me anyway." Laura reached for him, and for a moment, I thought she'd pull him close. But she hesitated, and that hesitation broke something in Jamie. He turned and walked out, leaving the journal on the table. I followed him, my heart pounding. We ended up at the waterfront, the Brooklyn Bridge looming in the distance. Jamie sat on a bench, staring at the water, his shoulders shaking. "They'll never accept me," he said. "They might," I said, sitting beside him. "But even if they don't, you're not alone. You've got me, and you've got a whole world out there waiting for you." He looked at me, his eyes bright with tears. "You really believe that?" "I do," I said, "and I'm gonna prove it to you." Months later, Jamie was thriving. He'd applied to art schools, his portfolio bursting with vibrant cityscapes and raw emotion. Laura and Greg were still struggling, but they'd started attending family therapy, slowly learning to listen. I was proud of them for trying, even if it was messy. As for me, Marcus and I were building something real. We spent weekends exploring the city, from Coney Island's chaos to quiet mornings in Prospect Park. One evening, as we stood on a rooftop overlooking the skyline, he took my hand and said, "You make me want to be brave, Ethan." I kissed him, the city lights blurring around us. "You do the same for me." Jamie's courage had sparked a chain reaction, teaching me that love, whether for family, a partner, or yourself, takes work, but it's worth it. We were all learning to live louder, to love harder, and to fight for the lives we deserved. And in the end, that was the truest kind of victory.